Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Washington, President Kennedy triumphs over Big Steel. In New Orleans, the Archbishop excommunicates 3 segregationists. In Vietnam, the U.S. Secretary of the Army predicts victory. 3 East Berliners crash out, Jack Lemmon branches out, and a thrilling Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
There's the Muriel Corona, a premium cigar.
Long for luxury, light for pleasure.
The brand new Muriel Corona. Take it from Edie Adams.
The Muriel Corona is a fine cigar. The shape is new, the blend is too. It's richer by far. You get the light touch with the right taste for only a dime. Why don't you pick one up and smoke it sometime?
President Kennedy scored a major victory this weekend over the titans of Big Steel. Just 72 hours after the major steel corporations had announced a price increase of $6 a ton, all of those companies reversed course. For 3 days, the administration applied steady public pressure to the industry. First, the president delivered a scathing indictment of the companies at last week's press conference, rousing public opinion against them. Second, grand jury proceedings were opened, leading to possible antitrust action. And third, threats were made to divert orders to smaller companies that had not raised their prices. At his press conference today, President Kennedy adopted a much different tone from last week's angry denunciation.
First, let me make it clear that this administration harbors no ill will against any individual, any industry, corporation, or segment of the American economy. Our goals of economic growth and price stability are dependent upon the success of both corporations, business, and labor. And there can be no room on either side in this country at this time for any feelings of hostility or vindictiveness. When a mistake has been retracted and the public interest preserved, nothing is to be gained from further public recriminations. Secondly, while our chief concern last week was to prevent an inflationary spiral, we were not then and are not now unmindful of the steel industry's needs for profits, modernization, and investment capital. I believe, in fact, that this administration and the leaders of steel and other American industries are in basic agreement on far more objectives than we are in disagreement.
Mr. Kennedy addressed accusations that he had personally set the price of steel in this country.
I'm aware of the accusations. What we attempted to do was project before the steel companies the public interest. And it was a combination of the public interest placed upon the table in front of them and competition, which I think brought the price down by the fact that several companies refused to increase prices and therefore competition worked its will. We want to be sure that competition is an active force in our economy. But I would not accept the view of the Wall Street Journal in regard to at least my feeling of a description of my actions or of the public interest.
In South Vietnamese provinces, from the Cambodian border to the South China Sea, the Communist Viet Cong are winning most of the battles, despite being outgunned by U.S.-trained government forces. U.S. Army Major Samuel J. Merrill said today, quote, "When I arrived in Vietnam last September, the Viet Cong were rarely encountered in groups exceeding 4 or 5. Now, they are frequently met in bands of 40 to 60. They used to run away at the approach of Vietnamese troops. Now, they sometimes stand and fight. That indicates leadership, training, and better equipment," unquote. Despite these developments, U.S. Secretary of the Army Elvis J. Starr, who just finished a 2-day visit to Saigon, predicted that the communists would be crushed in a few years, providing that the South Vietnamese people are determined to remain free. Mr. Starr said that he did not expect American combat troops to be deployed in South Vietnam. The Roman Catholic Church has excommunicated 3 segregationists over their efforts to hinder the integration of church schools. The sentence was published on the orders of Reverend Joseph Rummel, Archbishop of New Orleans for 27 years. The 3 who were excommunicated are Leander Perez, president of the Plaquemines Parish Council, Jackson Rico, executive director of the South Louisiana Citizens Councils, and Mrs. B.J. Gayo Jr., head of Save Our Nation Incorporated. In Rome, a Vatican spokesman said that Archbishop Rummel was correct in excommunicating those who had openly defied the church and had refused to accept the guidance of their pastors on questions of principle and doctrine. In New Orleans today, demonstrators picketed the home of Archbishop Rummel in protest of the decision. One of them was asked why she was demonstrating.
Under church law, to use political grounds to excommunicate anybody is illegal. Now, we do not feel that this was done in the spirit of Catholicism, and we feel also that the men who are now leading the Catholic Archdiocese in New Orleans are really socialist agents. We do not consider them true Catholics because you cannot be a true Catholic and a socialist at the same time. And they are advocating socialism.
She was asked if the protesters were a collection of individuals or part of a larger organization.
It's a group of individuals who found it necessary to combine their forces to fight this thing. We call ourselves Catholic Laymen for Segregation. We intend saving our schools because it was white people's money and effort who built all the Catholic schools, including the Negro schools.
At today's press conference, President Kennedy was asked for his views on the excommunications.
So the action of the Archbishop related to private acts and the private individuals did not involve public acts or public policies, so that carrying out the spirit of the Constitution, which provides a separation between church and state, I think would be inappropriate for me to comment.
I'll have more news for you after this message.
You know, wherever Peter Pan peanut butter is served, the same thing happens. Everybody has a good word for Peter Pan.
Peanuttiest. Peanuttiest.
That's the good word, peanuttiest. The sweetest, tenderest, freshest tasting peanuts go into Peter Pan. This means Peter Pan costs a little more, but oh, the eating is worth it.
What's the magic word?
Peanuttiest.
It's gone. That's showbiz.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
Klaus Brusky, a 24-year-old East German, was mortally wounded by communist gunfire today as he drove a dump truck through the Berlin Wall at a speed of 60 miles an hour. The 3-ton truck had been filled with sand to give it more battering power. Mr. Brusky was hit by 2 of 5 bullets that struck the cab. He died before crashing to a halt inside the western sector. However, his 2 companions survived the daring escape. One, sitting next to him, was shot in the shoulder but is reported to be in good condition. The other had concealed himself in the sand and was not hit by gunfire, although he suffered bruises as the truck crashed through the wall and into a building 250 yards inside West Berlin. Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt interviewed President Kennedy today in the Family Theater of the White House. Last December, the president appointed Mrs. Roosevelt to lead his Committee on the Status of Women.
Perhaps you'd be willing to tell the people what prompted you to name this committee at this time and what you feel is the real need for it.
Well, we are attempting to try to encourage every company in the United States and certainly stimulate governmental leadership in providing equal pay and equal conditions for women. 22 states do it now. We can do a much better job on that. We want to make sure that the available talent which we have in this country in trained women is being used effectively. I think we want to make sure that some recognition is given to the special problems women have as the mother and the housewife, and at the same time their desires to participate usefully in public and private life. This is a matter of great national concern, and I think that in this great society of ours, we want to be sure that women are used as effectively as they can to provide a better life for our people, in addition to meeting their primary responsibility, which is in the home.
Mr. Kennedy was asked why more women in this country had not been placed in policy-making positions.
Well, I suppose the first is the interruption in their careers that take place in the lives of most women because of their keeping a family and raising children. But I quite agree. I don't think we make the most use of our talent, not only in the government. And there are an awful lot of women that hold very key positions in the government. In fact, the other day when we gave the awards for the 5 outstanding civil servants, 2 of them were women of great technical skill. We have women in the UN delegation, of which you were a distinguished example, but I still think we ought to do better. I think we ought to do better in the field of medicine, for example. I think that the number of girls who are admitted to medical school, the number of practicing doctors, I don't think we do as good a job in this country as we ought to. We do better than a number of other countries, but not nearly as well, considering the talented women that we have, the great need for doctors. I think they do a good job in teaching, but in medicine is one of the great areas where I think we should stimulate. I think women make good doctors. They have the personal qualities and the patience, and I think to have 2 or 3% of each class admitted to be women is a great lack.
Finally, Mrs. Roosevelt asked if American women were using their educations to the best advantage.
Well, I think when you look at Radcliffe College, that the curve of academic excellence at Radcliffe is higher than it is at Harvard, and therefore you assume that this is really the most highly developed student body. What happens to those girls 2 or 3 years later? They are They get married. Many of them become housewives. And all that talent is, it's used in this family life, but is not used outside. Now, of course, it is true that they work on school boards, they work in the League of Women Voters, they work in church groups. In a whole variety of ways, they use this talent for strengthening the cohesion of our society. But I wonder whether they have the full opportunity to develop their talents. And if, as the Greeks said, the definition of happiness is full use of your powers along lines of excellence. And I wonder whether they have that opportunity. And this is not true just of Radcliffe, but of colleges and educated women, talented women all over the country.
The taped interview will be televised on June 2nd. Currently before the Warner Brothers cameras in San Francisco is Days of Wine and Roses. The film, starring Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick, depicts a young couple's downward spiral into alcoholism. Blake Edwards is directing the screenplay by J.P. Miller, who adapted it from his own Playhouse 90 television episode, which aired in 1958 with Cliff Robertson and Piper Laurie in the lead roles. Mr. Lemmon was asked recently if his role in this film marked a departure for him.
Well, you mean in the sense that it is more dramatic than the films that I've been doing? Yes, that's true. I've never really been concerned about playing purely comedy, although I've been identified as far as films go mostly with comedies. I just am concerned at any time that I'm going to consider a part for the part itself and the people that I'm going to work with, rather than is it a drama, is it a romance, is it a comedy, etc.
In one scene, Mr. Lemmon's character destroys his father-in-law's greenhouse while searching for a stashed liquor bottle. The 37-year-old actor was asked if the physically demanding nature of such scenes had taken a toll.
Well, I got banged up pretty good in this thing, actually, because a great deal of it is rather physical. So you have to do it. You can't use a double, and you have to do it, and I pulled a few cartilages, and I think I came close to a triple hernia or something. I don't know. Got fingers all banged up. I don't know. You can't see the blood blisters anymore. But I got a little banged up, but I think it's worth it.
Finally, Mr. Lemmon discussed his current career plans.
Well, my biggest plan is to be a leading young star. I love that word, young. Got to stay with it. I think someday I would like to direct. And it's funny, the better the directors you work with, the more you learn. And you would think that would be a great incentive and a great background to prepare you for directing. But the problem is that when you work with someone like Billy Wilder or John Ford, or in this instance, Blake Edwards or Dick Quine, whom I've worked with several times, these, I think, are the top people in our profession. And I've been terribly fortunate to work with them. And instead of being elated by what I've learned and figuring that I could now maybe direct, instead I look at them and see what they do and what they accomplish with their direction and with a camera, and I say I could never do it. So I don't know how soon I will be in a frame of mind or have the guts, let's say, to try and do it. But I would like to.
Sports, right after this.
Radio Free Europe needs your help to fight communism. Give now to Radio Free Europe.
The Boston Celtics won their fourth consecutive NBA championship tonight over the Los Angeles Lakers at Boston Garden. The final score was 110-107. The Celtics controlled the action for most of the game, but the Lakers, as they've done all year, came storming back in the fourth quarter. With 35 seconds remaining in the game and Boston clinging to a 2-point lead, Bob Cousy, the Celtics' outstanding point guard, had possession of the ball.
35 seconds. In the backcourt, Cousy. Cousy in the front court. To Braun. Braun to Cousy. Cousy looks for somebody to give to. 30 seconds left. Over to Ramsey, intercepted by West. West on a breakaway. He'll try to go all the way. He does. Shot no good. The rebound is Selvey. Under the shot. Good! Lakers tie it up. It's 100-100. 20 seconds left. The ball into Braun. Boston timeout.
With 5 seconds remaining and the game still tied, Los Angeles guard Frank Selvey had a chance to bring the Lakers their first NBA title since 1954.
The ball is out to Selvey. They'll try to get it in. They do to Hundley. 5 seconds. Hundley to Selvey. His jumper on the way. No good. Rebound Russell. The game's over. Overtime.
And the Celtics, on the strength of Sam Jones's shooting and Bill Russell's rebounding, prevailed in overtime. 6'10" Bill Russell was tonight's top performer, grabbing 44 rebounds, a postseason record, and scoring 30 points. Lakers star Elgin Baylor, who will now report back to Army duties at Fort Lewis in Washington, was the top scorer with 41 points. Jerry West, who along with Baylor sparked the Lakers' comeback, had 35. The Lakers won 3 straight NBA crowns from 1952 to 54 when the team was in Minneapolis, but no NBA franchise had ever put 4 consecutive titles together until tonight. And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Wednesday, April 18th, 1962. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.